In the previous video, we planned a project for a simple calculator to do addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And we created a storyboard for that project. We're now going to translate that storyboard into actually creating the application in Visual Studio. I'm using Visual Studio 2010 Professional, and if you're using VB.NET or Visual Basic.NET Express or Visual C# Express, it'll look a little bit different. In Visual Studio, it has access to both Visual Basic and C# as well as C++ and a few other languages. So it's kind of a one-stop programming area for all things Microsoft Windows. When you first install Visual Studio, you may come up with a screen that asks you to choose which language you'll predominantly work in. And if you're working in our lab or in a classroom, you may not see that. So you may come into a screen that looks basically like this when you launch Visual Studio. What I'm going to do is create a new project, and there's two places I can do that. There's an option here on the Start page, or I can go to the File menu and choose New Project. And over on the right-hand side, there are installed templates. The thing I want to point out here is this is where you choose which language you're going to use. So if I want to create a Visual Basic project, I'm going to come into Visual Basic. And then over in the center are all the different things I can do with Visual Basic. We're going to create a Windows Forms application, and that's predominantly what we're going to do this semester in this class. So we would choose Visual Basic, Windows Forms application, and you can then give it a name. I'm going to call it SMCC Simple Calculator. And in parentheses I'll put VB because I'm going to create a C# version of this as well. And then I'm going to click OK. Now, if you're doing C#, you would simply choose Visual C#, Windows Forms application, create the name, and put C# in here. I'm going to go back and choose Visual Basic. Click OK. And it now is going to create my Visual Basic project. I'm going to see a few things happen on the screen here. Over on the left-hand side is our toolbox. Our form that we're actually going to create is here in the center. And then over on the right-hand side are some windows that we'll use in terms of working with the files and the controls and the objects of our application. I'm just going to make a few slight changes here. I'm going to narrow my toolbox down a little bit just by grabbing the right-hand side and dragging. We can do the same thing over here on these panels on the right-hand side. And then I'm going to go to the File menu and choose Save All. Now you notice there's a Save Form1.vb and a Save Form1.vb as and a Save All. For now, you should always choose Save All. You can get into trouble choosing the Save Form1.vb or Save Form1.vb as. You don't want to separate your project files at this point. So when you get ready to save your projects, always choose Save All. And since we haven't saved this already, we're going to basically tell where we want to save it. So I'm going to save it here in my SMCC CS162AD C# folder. Actually, I'm going to browse to my VB folder since this is a VB project. And I'm going to click Save. Now what we have here in our project is our form. A form is simply another name for a window. This is our base window. And notice it has a title bar. It has a minimize, maximize, and a close button. And at this point, those are functional. I haven't done anything to this application, but if I click this little green arrow up here on the button bar that says Start Debugging with the tooltip, that will actually take my project, all my source files, and compile them into an exe file. And here's that exe file running. Notice my Visual Studio is kind of grayed out back here. This is the project. I can minimize it. I can come down to the status bar and bring it back. I can maximize that project, toggle it back to the defined size, and I can close that project. Those buttons all work. Now let me show you what's happening behind the scenes here. I'm going to go into my folder where that project was located, and we named it SMCC Simple Calculator. So here's the project folder. I'm going to open up that project folder so you can see what's in here. There are lots of files that are created when we create a file. These are all your source files or source code. And then there's some folders as well. I'm going to burrow down in a couple of these folders and go into the bin folder. That has two folders, debug and release. I'm going to burrow down into the debug folder. And then here is my executable file, SMCC Simple Calculator VB.exe. That's the compiled project, and I could take that file and send it to somebody or distribute it on a CD, and anybody with Windows could run that project. If I just double click on it, there's that project we created. Now there's nothing in the window at this point, but everything is working as far as the buttons here at the top of our form. When you go to turn in your projects to me for grading, I need this entire folder, all the contents of that folder. So burrow out to the main folder, and you would then right-click on it and choose Send to Compressed Zip Folder. And that's going to put all those files into one zip file, and that's what you're going to submit to me for grading. Okay, so I'm going to go back out now to Visual Studio, and we'll do some more work on this project. We talked about properties and objects having properties, and this form or this window is an object. Over here on the right hand side I have a properties folder, and it shows me at the top what object I currently have selected. Notice there are selection handles around my window, and that is Form 1. That is the name of this object. Remember, everything has a name. And so this is named Form 1. And for now, my caution to you is do not change the name of the startup form or your main form. We'll look at how to do that much later in the semester, but doing so at this point could create some problems. So always leave it named Form 1. But what I want to change is what's up here on the title bar. And so one of the properties, and I can scroll through this list of properties, is the text property. And I should also point out that underneath the selected object drop-down are some buttons. And there's the one on the left will allow us to look at these properties grouped by classifications. The second one allows us to look at them alphabetized. And that's the way I prefer to work. I don't necessarily remember where each property is within its group, but I know what the property name is, and I usually find it if it's alphabetized. So I'm looking for the text property. The properties are organized here in that on the left-hand side is a column of our property names, and on the right-hand side is the value of that property. So right now the text has a value of Form 1. I'm going to highlight through Form 1, and I'm going to type a new value of SMC Simple Calculator. And when I press the Enter key, watch what happens up here on the title of my form. It changes to that. So by changing the property, I change what's visually happening in my window. There's also a property here for size. Right now my window is 300 by 300, and I could grab one of the handles and stretch it out, and you'll notice that now it's 418 by 300. I could also type in values here. I could say I want this to be 200 by 200, press the Enter key, and now my form is much smaller. I'm going to make it 400 by 300. So I can either change some of these properties visually, in the case of the size of the form by dragging it, or I can specify values in the Properties window. I can also change the back color of my form. That is another property. So here's the back color property. And on this property, it shows me what the current value is. It's currently control. And if I click on that, rather than selecting it and typing in a new value, there's a drop-down arrow in which it will give me some palettes. And there are 3 color palettes in Visual Studio. System, which is based on whatever theme you have set up and the color scheme you have set up in Windows. There are web colors. These are named colors that web browsers understand. And then there's custom, which gives you some standard color swatches, and you can also create your own colors out of any of the 16.7 million different 24-bit RGB colors. I'm just going to come to custom here, and I'm going to choose a light blue. And you'll notice that has changed now the background color of my form.